This is the third part of my series about stupid things car guys say. You can watch the other two after this video because the series is not in any particular chronological order, so for now stay with me here and let's get on with the video. You know what really rustles my jimmies? I don't like it when people start bragging that their modern day sports car can beat an old stock version of that same sports car. For example, someone with a modern Mustang will like drag race at a stoplight against some old guy who's just out on a Sunday cruise in their old 1965 Mustang. And they'll be like, oh, in your face, I'm so much faster. You know, it's always like some douchey teenager. My guy, you wouldn't brag about winning against your grandpa in a foot race, now would you? Now, in the perspective of cars, that's basically what you're doing. In the same vein that in a foot race, your grandpa is, he could have been a great athlete in his day, is one that would easily whoop your ass. But he's old, they're frail, and with age comes a lot of deterioration with muscle. So if you race him in a foot race as a young teenage something, brand new, fresh out of the box, you're gonna whoop him. It doesn't matter how fast your grandpa was, how athletic he was in his past, he's not gonna be able to beat you. But that doesn't discredit your grandpa's accomplishments. It's just overall a douche move to race your grandpa and then brag about it afterwards. That's the same thing with an old stock sports car. Back in the day, Mustangs were fast, yeah, an old Mustang V8, one of the greatest cars you could get on the planet, beautiful, affordable, and it moved, they really moved. By modern standards, yeah, they're tragically slow, they're insanely slow actually, but that doesn't discredit the type of speed they had when they were new. They're old now, get over it, just like your old grandpa, they're old, they're slower. With resto-modded cars, obviously the story's different because that's like if your grandpa started to become a cyborg and then re-challenge you to a foot race, because now he might actually win if he's in that cyborg getup, and that's kind of how resto-mod cars are. Now you're taking old cars and basically doing all Frankenstein stuff to them until they do become rather fast even by modern standards, but that's not what this entry is about, because I guess they just always want to stroke their ego everywhere they go, and it's really sad, just like, dude, look, leave this old man on the Sunday cruise alone. He's driving his old Mustang or old Corvette or old Datsun. He doesn't care about racing. People who drive classic cars are like the least douchey people. When you think of every single car, they all come with some kind of stereotype, whether it's a sports car and the wannabe boy racer vibe, whether it's a luxury car and the wannabe like, oh, I'm so rich vibe and stuff like that. But when it comes when I see any classic car, be it a Jag, a Porsche, a Datsun, an old Mustang, even rather mundane ones, I could see a freaking adorable Yugo, which by every stretch of the imagination is a piece of trash, but god, do I respect the drivers driving them. And most people who drive classics and keep them in OEM condition do not care about racing people, so for the love of God, leave them alone. And if they do want to playfully race just to hear the sound of their engine, you can humor them, and when you beat them, don't rub it in their face. I know some grandpas who they'll go around in their old stock Mustang and they'll humor modern Mustangs by pushing hard on the gas because they just want to listen to their engine. I can't blame them. And they're gonna lose at the end of the day, but you'll see the other guy in the Mustang, they'll give him a thumbs up, and that's what I'm talking about. That's good sportsmanship. That's the way it should be, in my opinion. Just give these guys respect. Just don't stop racing grandpas in foot races and bragging about winning is what I'm trying to say. That's the best analogy that I could possibly use, and I hope you guys can understand that analogy. On the topic of old cars, another thing that I really hate about car guys and what they say is when they strip retro supercars of their title. What I mean by that is, oh, well, you see, the Acura NSX first gen or the Lamborghini Diablo, they're really slow by modern standards because a modern Mustang GT, which is like an affordable entry-level, I wouldn't even call it sports car, it's more of muscle, but let's be real, non-car people call them sports cars, a lot of people do. It's a quote-unquote sports car, and it's now faster than old supercars from like 20, 30 years ago. So they're like, oh, that means the NSX and Diablo aren't supercars anymore, and okay. Here's an analogy I have for this one. If you graduated college from 20 or 30 years ago with a degree, after 30 years pass, does your degree no longer mean anything? Like, does your boss suddenly come back up to you and be like, actually, you're fired from your job now, you need to re-go back to college? No, he doesn't. You've been working for the company, you've been learning as you've been working. Obviously, it's different if you got a degree from 30 years ago and then stopped learning from that point on, because then you would need to be re-educated. But assuming they contributed to the society as well as stayed within the corporation and kept ranking up and learning more and more and even teaching people who kept coming in and training more rookies, they're fine. They don't need to re-get a new degree. Their credentials do not suddenly disappear just because their past standards were different than the modern standards that have changed. That's the same with old supercars. If they have met the old past standards of their time for what qualified as a supercar, even if the modern standards of a supercar has changed, they do not get stripped of their title as a supercar, because that would be like stripping people of degrees as time goes on. That just doesn't make sense. Credentials are credentials. So the next time someone tries to convince you that an old Ferrari or old Lamborghini or anything like that isn't really a supercar because her a modern sports car is just as fast, use the degree analogy that I used. Now this one, this is a bit more personal, but I'm just going to throw it in this video because I also hear it said a lot recently, especially to me, and it's that vertical doors aren't that practical because they still have to worry about what's above them.
These next set of doors were actually built out of necessity by Lamborghini. But they have a big flaw, and that is when you open them, you gotta know what's above you because they open pretty high. And if you're not careful, you could bang them on a ceiling.
Okay, alright. Oftentimes, you always have to worry about horizontal space. Horizontal space is a lot more limited than vertical space. Let's say you're parked outside in a parking lot, whether it's a mall lot, a gym parking lot, no matter what, you have to worry about the guy next to you. That space is rather universal. The parking spot is somewhat same across the entire world. So no matter what car you have, having vertical doors would benefit that. You know what you never have to worry about when you're parked outside? Hitting the freaking sky. You're not in danger of your doors ever hitting the sky, but you're very much in danger of your doors hitting the guy next to you. And now you're thinking, oh, well, what about the indoors example? Get this. Most supercars or low-slung exotics with vertical doors, with their doors fully upwards, extended out, they are still shorter than SUVs. Yep. You know how many modern-day garages can accommodate SUVs? Yeah. I don't think you ever have to worry about vertical space. So if anyone tries to convince you that vertical doors have to worry about what's above them, just give them the really stupid look. Just tell them last time I checked, the sky is a lot further than the guy next to you. And even if it's not outdoors, like I said, indoor-wise, SUVs are taller than most cars' vertical doors. And I know someone's going to mention, what about an SUV with a vertical door? Believe it or not, you would still be okay. You'd probably clear a lot of areas, and that's because SUV doors are smaller. They have 4 doors. So when the passenger door or driver door goes up for the SUV vertically, it won't increase the vehicle's height that much. It really won't. Like, I've seen big lifted trucks that still can go into like parking garages with like 8 foot, 10 foot clearance just fine. And a lot of people forget that cars in general aren't that tall. When you first buy a car, the first thing you notice is actually how tall humans relative are to their vehicles. Like, vehicles look so big on pictures, they look so big on video games, but whenever you step out of your car and look at it, you're like, man, you're a shorty. And that's probably why vertical space, in my opinion, is just never something you have to worry about. If you do have an exotic car, it is almost always beneficial to go up as opposed to going out, because when it comes to having 2 massive, giant coupe-like doors, they are very long and they definitely benefit from going up. Another thing that pisses me off, it's not just really a thing that car guys say, it's many things that car guys say that stems from a type of behavior, and that's kind of being a douchebag know-it-all. And I cover this a lot in a lot of my videos, but I'm going to kind of exaggerate like on a certain example. So something I get told, or at least was told recently on my Noob's Guide series, is that I wasn't thorough enough, particularly on my headers video where someone's like, I'm so disappointed you didn't talk about compression ratios and how an individual shops can affect products. For example, shorties from a good shop are going to perform better than long tubes from a bad shop. So you're really giving people misinformation by telling them that long tubes are always better than shorties. In my opinion, I wasn't, because it's a Noob's Guide series. I'm not going to get as complicated to talk about compression ratios. I'm not going to tell them specific shops, because you know why? You can read online reviews. I'm not going to hold people's hand every single step of the way. There are thousands, if not tens of thousands of local shops across the world. You think I'm going to review every single one of them in a Noob's Guide to Headers video? Generally speaking, long tubes will always perform better than shorties. If you go to a bad shop that makes really horrible long tubes that are outperformed by if you were to go to a good shop and get really nice shorties, that's a very niche example. It's not my fault you can't read online reviews in 2020, where literally everyone and their mother usually reads online reviews before visiting somewhere, especially if it's something as expensive as modifying your vehicle. That's not on me, alright? Is it true that some shops put out better work than others to the point that like things that are traditionally bad can be better than things that are traditionally good? Yes, but that is not the rule. That is an exception. Another funny elitist thing I always get is when people try to mention really obscure facts. They're like, oh, you didn't know that the reason Porsches use stickers is because it's a reference to Sir Fuckington III of blah blah blah. He used to be a super famous race car driver. Look, I don't care. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's a dumb notion, but I also find it charming. I think Porsches with stickers as badges, it's cute. Is there history behind it? Sure, but the guy was like, oh, you didn't know that? You're not a real car guy. I hate it when people say oh, you don't know obscure fact. You're not a real car guy. I can play this game all day, because people usually tend to specialize. For example, you could be a total Porsche purist and know all of the Porsche obscure facts and call everyone else a fake car guy, but you may have a total blind spot the rest of the tuner community. So if someone started throwing out some really obscure JDM facts, now all of a sudden you don't know them. Does that mean you're not a true car guy? That's not how this works, because then we're just going to be sitting here all day calling each other not true car guys. That's the most ridiculous type of gatekeeping. I'm not against the idea of gatekeeping. I've mentioned it in my past videos. I'm not some super entitled snowflake who's going to be like, oh my god, like, how dare you guys try to tell me? Like, I get the fact that you can't just be someone who's like, oh, I've heard of like cars before, so I guess that makes me a car guy. You still need to have avid interest, and you still need to be continuously learning about cars to be considered a car guy. But you don't need to know super obscure facts or history or weird things like that. For example, if I were to randomly say a fact off the top of my head, the most fun one I always mention is the company Vector, because that's a company most people don't know about. Did you know the Vector WX8 uses Supra headlights? Most people haven't even heard of that car, and even if they did and looked at it, they couldn't tell that those are Supra headlights right off the glance. Having said that, does that mean you're not a car guy? Can I start calling people fake car guys because they can't identify a really obscure fact? No. So I think that's a really annoying thing that car guys do need to tone down of all the toxic things we do in this community. This final one's gonna rustle everyone's jimmies, I know, and that's gonna be when people say cars are just point A to point B. This is actually something that non-car guys say, but get this, I don't think it's stupid. What I think is stupid is what car guys say about it. They get really angry when someone says cars are just point A to point B. Here's the reality of it. A long time ago with video games, I'm gonna use this as an analogy. It used to be a tight-knit community, but then as games became more and more available, especially with the mobile phone industry, there are a ton of quote-unquote gamers now. Even your mother may tell you she's a gamer because she plays some games on her mobile device. And the truth is, she's not a real gamer. She's just someone who occasionally plays games. And the reason I mention this analogy is that's kind of what happened with cars. There was once a time where very much just meant you were an enthusiast. It was very rare for people to own cars a century ago. But then everyone started owning cars because the reality of it is they are transportation, in the same way that most non-gamers started catching on to mobile games because it was a way to kill time. Most non-car people would start using cars because it was an effective form of personal transportation. Their existence doesn't discredit the car community in the same way that like all those non-gamers or entry-level gamers playing mobile phone games doesn't discredit everyone else who still plays the more hardcore games. Any market, if it's given this much time, because you have to remember cars have been around for more than a century now, of course it's going to hit mainstream eventually. And when it hits mainstream, there's going to be a lot of people who just use the market and the products that come from it solely for one purpose, even if that purpose wasn't the original passion that went into it, like the thrill of speed, the amazing movement of cars, all the engineering and mechanics that go behind it. Like there's a lot of people today that don't even know the damnedest thing about the vehicle that they drive to and fro from work. That doesn't mean I think they don't deserve to own the car. I think that's a very entitled way of thinking. People are like, wow, they're all just fake car guys. We should strip them of all their cars. They don't deserve to use cars because they don't appreciate them. They have other things that happen in their life. And some of these people actually do really love cars. They don't love cars in a way that we can traditionally understand or consider, though. This is something that flipped me on the head. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, and also, if you haven't seen the other parts, make sure to watch them right here. I'll link them right at this end card. What do you know? Boom, click them, have fun. I promise you, they're very fun. Somehow the second part actually has more views than the first part. Regardless though, that's gonna be it. See y'all next time. Bladed Angel out.